Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling something I think we all struggle with at some point.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Finding meaning and happiness in life, even when things get a little bit tough, you know?
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at Mark Manson's book,
Okay.
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
It's a good one.
And now, before you think this is about being indifferent or
Right.
not caring about anything, let me assure you, that's not what it's about at all.
No.
It's about figuring out what really matters to you.
Yeah, it's fascinating how that title can be a little misleading.
Right.
Like you said, it's not about apathy. It's really about being strategic
Yeah.
with your energy and attention.
Mm,
And Manson argues we all have a limited number of fucks to give.
right.
And so it's kind of like a budget, but for your mental and emotional resources.
Okay, I love that analogy. So
Yeah.
instead of just spending our fucks on every little thing that
Right.
comes our way, that maybe doesn't deserve it.
Exactly.
Manson wants us to be more intentional about where we direct that energy.
That's right.
And he says we should be investing those fucks in things that truly align with our values
Yeah.
and create what he calls
Yeah.
good problems. But what are good problems?
Yeah.
That sounds a little counterintuitive.
Right. Well, think about it this way. Let's say you really value fitness.
Okay.
You know, you might struggle to drag yourself out of bed
Yeah.
for that early morning workout.
I know that feeling.
But ultimately, that struggle is worth it because it contributes to your overall health and well-being.
Uh-huh.
So it's a challenge, but it's a good problem to have
Yeah.
because it pushes you to grow.
Right. It's about choosing the struggles that actually move you forward in life.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. It's way too easy to get caught up giving a feck about things that are, well, kind of superficial. You know, he even gives this funny anecdote about this woman throwing a fit at a grocery store over like a 30-cent coupon.
Oh, my gosh.
It makes you wonder, like, what is going on there?
Yeah. It illustrates how when we lack those truly meaningful things to care about, we tend to overreact
Yeah.
to even the smallest things.
Yeah.
And so why do we fall into that
Well,
trap?
why do we give a feck about the wrong things?
Well, Manson suggests it's because we're bombarded with messages, especially online,
right.
that prioritize these really shallow values.
Okay.
It's like we're being conditioned to believe
Mm.
that these things are actually important.
So true. And social media is like a perfect example of this.
Absolutely.
Right, where everyone's presenting this curated,
Yes.
picture-perfect version of their lives,
Totally.
which makes us feel inadequate,
Yes.
like we're not doing enough, or our lives aren't as glamorous.
Exactly. And it feeds into this need for validation from external sources
Okay.
instead of focusing on what truly resonates with us.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into this next idea of entitlement,
Yeah.
right, which Manson talks about as this invisible trap.
Yes.
So how does he define that? How does he define entitlement?
Well, he describes it as this belief
Mm-hmm.
that we deserve good things without actually having to earn them.
Okay.
You know, like expecting the universe to hand us
Right.
success and happiness on a silver platter just because we exist.
Yeah, yeah.
He uses this great example in the book, a guy named Jimmy, who basically constructs this elaborate facade of success, but his reality is actually crumbling around him.
Wow, so he's pretending to have it all together.
Yeah, it's a classic case of entitlement in action.
Yeah. Have you ever encountered someone like that?
Oh, yeah, totally.
I think we probably all have at some point.
Yeah.
But how does that entitlement play out in our relationship?
Well, that's a great question. Manson makes this fascinating comparison
Okay.
between victims and savers in relationships.
Okay, so what does he mean by that?
He describes victims as those who constantly blame others for their problems,
Okay.
and savers as those who constantly try to fix everyone else's problems.
Okay.
And he argues that both of these roles can actually prevent people from taking responsibility for their own happiness.
So it's like they're two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. They create this endless loop of dysfunction.
You're right. If we're always either blaming other people or
Yeah.
trying to fix other people, we're never actually confronting our own stuff.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But you know what's refreshing about Manson? Is that he doesn't just point out our flaws. He offers a different perspective on failure.
Yeah.
He argues that it's not something to be avoided at all costs,
Okay.
but rather it's a crucial part of growth and progress.
He really flips the script on that. I love the anecdote he shares about Picasso.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the woman in the cafe asks to buy a napkin drawing, and Picasso says it'll be $20,000.
Right.
And she's like, it took you 2 minutes to draw that.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, ma'am. It took me 60 years to draw this.
Oh, that's so good.
It's such a good story. It's
Yeah.
a powerful reminder that
Yeah.
mastery takes time,
Yeah.
effort, and Yeah, even failure.
Exactly.
It's not about fearing failure. It's about understanding that it's just part of the journey.
Yeah.
But let's get practical here.
Okay, how can we apply this idea of not giving effect in our everyday lives? Like, he talks a lot about the power of saying no.
He does.
He shares a personal story about his time in Russia
Oh, yeah.
and how the direct communication style there really challenged his own tendency to be overly polite and kind of avoid confrontation.
It's a great example of how cultural norms can really shape our behavior.
Yeah, and sometimes hold us back.
Totally.
Have you ever felt that pressure to say yes
Oh, gosh, yeah. All the time.
to things you don't really want to do
Oh, yeah.
out of obligation or fear of missing out?
Yeah.
Saying no can be hard.
It can be so hard. But remember, saying no allows you to prioritize what truly aligns with your values.
It's a way of saying yes to yourself, to
Exactly.
what's important to you.
That's right.
Okay, but what about love?
Yeah.
Isn't that something worth giving a feck about?
That's a good question.
Manson actually has a pretty unconventional take on love.
He does.
He suggests that the way love is portrayed in our culture,
It's kind of messed up.
yeah, like he uses Romeo and Juliet as an
Oh.
example. Instead of this like ultimate romantic ideal,
Yeah.
he argues it's more of a cautionary tale
Right.
about the dangers of impulsive
Yeah.
and immature love.
It's not how most people see it.
No, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think about it,
Right.
Romeo and Juliet are driven by this very intense, all-consuming passion
Yeah.
that ultimately leads to tragedy.
Yeah. So maybe not the best model.
Right. He argues that healthy relationships actually require a lot more
Okay.
than just passion and grand gestures.
Okay.
They require clear boundaries, mutual respect, and a willingness to both reject and be rejected.
Right. So even in love, it's crucial to define what we truly value.
Exactly.
Make sure our actions align with those values.
Absolutely.
But that brings us to a much deeper,
Yeah.
perhaps heavier topic, death.
Mm-hmm.
Manson actually explores death anxiety.
He does.
And he draws heavily on the work of Ernest Becker
Yes.
and his book, The Denial of Death.
Which is so insightful.
Mm.
Becker argues that our awareness of our own mortality creates this underlying anxiety that drives so much of our behavior.
Right.
We cling to arbitrary values. We chase meaningless goals, all in an attempt to create a legacy
Yeah.
and to feel like our lives have significance
Right.
beyond our physical existence.
It's like we're trying to leave our mark
Exactly.
on the world.
Yeah.
Manson even shares a really personal story
Oh, wow.
about nearly stepping off a cliff in Portugal.
Oh, gosh.
It was an experience that forced him to confront his own mortality in a very real way.
Yeah. Those kinds of experiences, as terrifying as they are,
Right.
can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
They force us to question what truly matters
Uh-huh.
and to let go of the things that don't.
Like it was almost like a wake-up call for him, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, life is precious.
Absolutely.
Don't waste it on things that don't matter.
Exactly.
So how do we start identifying
Yeah.
what we truly give a feck about? I mean, that seems to be like the core of Manson's message, figuring out what's worth suffering for,
Yeah.
what good problems we want to have in our lives.
Right. The journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
It can be really challenging.
Right.
Manson argues that we're all born giving way too many fucks about way too many things.
Okay.
But as we mature, we need to refine those values,
Right.
figure out what truly aligns with who we are.
Yeah. And he uses this interesting analogy of a king
Oh, yeah.
who tries to like shield his son from all suffering.
Yeah.
The prince lives in this bubble, but he's totally miserable because nothing has any meaning or value to him.
Exactly.
And it's only when he ventures out into the real world and confronts, you know, the harsh realities, poverty, sickness, death, that he finally starts to develop a sense of purpose.
Yes, and it speaks to our human need to struggle,
Right.
to face challenges,
Yeah.
to appreciate the good things.
Totally. It's not about seeking out suffering.
Right.
It's about understanding that it's inevitable and it can lead to growth.
Exactly.
But how do we take responsibility for our struggles
Yeah.
without falling into the trap of blaming ourselves
That's a good question.
for everything?
Well, Manson makes a distinction between responsibility and fault.
Okay.
Just because something bad happens to us doesn't mean it's our fault,
Right.
but it is our responsibility to choose how we respond to it,
Okay.
how we interpret it, how we learn from it, how we move forward.
It's like that quote, you're not responsible for the cards you're dealt,
Yeah.
but you are responsible for how you play them.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
But he also talks about this human tendency to avoid anything that threatens our sense of self,
Oh, yeah.
our identity,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's success, failure,
Right.
anything that challenges our deeply held beliefs.
Ah, yes. Manson's law of avoidance.
Okay.
It's a natural instinct to protect our egos.
Mm.
Shield ourselves from anything that might make us feel uncertain or uncomfortable.
So how do we get past that avoidance?
Well, he argues that it's by confronting our fears and insecurities,
Yeah.
leaning into the discomfort.
So it's like saying growth happens outside of our comfort zones.
Exactly.
We have to be willing to push those boundaries, feel a little awkward, vulnerable even.
Yeah.
And he also challenges that whole idea of finding yourself and suggesting it can be a bit limiting.
Yeah.
And he encourages us to kind of constantly question who we are
Right.
and what we believe.
It's a process of continuous self-discovery.
Right. And part of that involves
Uh-huh.
challenging those deeply ingrained beliefs,
Yes.
those values that we've inherited from our families,
Right.
our culture, society at large.
Right.
Are they truly ours?
Yeah.
Or are we just accepting them without questioning them?
Exactly.
And he talks about the importance of identifying what he calls shitty values,
Yeah.
those that lead to unhealthy behaviors, keep us stuck in this cycle of negativity.
Right. Like chasing pleasure at all costs.
Okay.
Needing to always be right.
Yeah.
Or constantly focusing on what you don't have.
It's interesting because those things seem positive at first glance.
Right. They seem appealing,
Yeah.
but ultimately they're quite superficial
Right.
and lead to suffering.
So what's the alternative? What kind of values should we be prioritizing?
Well, he encourages us to prioritize values that are more process-oriented.
Okay.
Things like honesty, growth, contribution.
Okay.
These values are about ongoing effort and progress.
So it's about the journey.
Yes,
So
about embracing the journey.
rather than just fixating on the outcome.
Exactly.
And that ties into embracing uncertainty.
Right.
It's acknowledging that we don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
And there's always more to learn.
That's right.
I think about that experiment he talks about.
Oh, yeah.
Where people are put in this room with buttons,
Uh-huh.
and if they press them in a certain sequence, a light flashes, they get a point. But the points are actually random.
Totally random. But they convince themselves that they figured out the system.
It's fascinating.
It is.
And scary at the same time.
Right.
Because it shows how much we crave
Yeah.
order and meaning.
Our brains are wired to find patterns.
Yeah, even when they don't exist.
Exactly.
It highlights the importance of questioning our beliefs.
Yes.
Being open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
Right. That our perceptions are skewed.
It's like we need a healthy dose of humility
Absolutely.
as we go through life. Right?
Yes.
We need to be willing to let go of beliefs
Yeah.
if they're not serving us.
That's right.
Sometimes it takes an experience that really shakes us up to lead to the most growth.
Totally.
He tells that story about his friend Josh,
Oh, yeah.
who tragically died when they were teenagers.
Yeah.
And Manson talks about how that experience,
Uh-huh.
as horrific as it was,
Right.
changed his perspective on life.
Yeah.
He realized how fragile life is and that he wasn't living up to his potential.
Yeah. It's like a forced confrontation with our own mortality.
Totally.
And it brings us back to that concept of death anxiety,
Right.
which Manson explores so eloquently.
He draws heavily on the work of Ernest Becker,
Yes.
who argued that our awareness of our own death
Uh-huh.
is this primary driving force
Uh-huh.
behind so much of our behavior.
It's a powerful idea.
Yeah.
Becker suggested that we create these elaborate immortality projects,
Okay.
careers, relationships, ideologies, to leave a lasting legacy.
Okay.
Feel like our lives have meaning
Okay.
on our physical existence.
And those can be positive, but
Yeah.
they can also be really destructive
Oh, absolutely.
if we cling to them too tightly,
Yeah.
if we let them define our worth or drive us to do harmful things.
Right. He gives that striking example of Lieutenant Hiru Onoda,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
the Japanese soldier who hid in the jungle
You're right.
for nearly 30 years
Wow.
after World War II ended
Yeah.
because he refused to believe the war was over.
Wow.
He dedicated his entire life to this outdated mission,
Right.
all in the name of serving his country.
In finding meaning.
Exactly. And it's a cautionary tale
Right.
about clinging to beliefs
Yeah.
and ideologies.
That no longer serve us.
That's right.
But this idea of death anxiety plays out in our everyday lives.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
just so many ways.
It's not just about war or grand missions.
Right.
It's about this underlying fear
Yeah.
of being insignificant,
Right.
of being forgotten.
And that drives so much of what we do.
Absolutely. It's the root of our need for validation,
Yeah.
our fear of failure,
Yeah.
our constant comparisons to others.
So how do we deal with that?
Yeah, that's the big question, right?
Because it's one thing to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
embracing death and all that, but how do we actually put that into practice?
Well, Manson argues that accepting the inevitability of death
Okay.
can actually free us
Yeah.
to live more fully in the present moment. It allows us to detach from superficial concerns,
Right.
to let go of those things we can't control,
Yeah.
truly savor the beauty and preciousness of life.
He tells this incredible story
Well,
about his own experience in Portugal where he
Oh.
was hiking with friends
okay.
and he found himself drawn to this cliff.
Oh, wow.
He felt this like magnetic pull
Yeah.
towards the edge.
Oh, my gosh.
Like this urge to just step over.
It's a chilling image, isn't it?
It is.
But it holds a profound message.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront our own mortality
Right.
in a very visceral way.
And he didn't jump,
Yeah.
but that experience was a turning point.
Yeah.
It made him realize that life is short
Right.
and he didn't want to waste time on things that didn't align with his values.
It's a message that resonates with all of us.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the present moment, making conscious choices
Right.
about how we spend our time and energy,
Yeah.
living a life that's true to ourselves.
Yeah. So are there any practical tips or strategies that he offers for navigating these existential anxieties?
He does.
Because it can feel really overwhelming.
Right. Cool.
Like it's one thing to talk about embracing death, but it's another thing to actually do it.
Right.
So what are some of those practical takeaways?
Well, one of the key points he emphasizes is the importance of choosing our values wisely.
Okay.
We're constantly evaluating ourselves in comparison to others.
Right. Which is natural.
Right.
But the key is choosing the right metrics for comparison.
Exactly.
Like, who are we comparing ourselves to?
Yeah.
What standards are we using? He uses the example of Dave Mustaine,
Oh, yeah.
the guitarist from Megadeth, who
Right.
used to be in Metallica. And despite all his success with Megadeth,
Right.
he still considered himself a failure
Yeah.
because he wasn't as big as Metallica.
It's like he was setting himself up for disappointment
Yeah.
by focusing on this one metric of success, which was based on someone else's achievements.
Right. It's like we have to define success on our own terms,
Exactly.
choosing values that are more intrinsic,
Yeah.
focused on our own growth and development
Right.
rather than external validation.
That's right.
And he contrasts Mustaine's story with that of Pete Best,
Okay.
the original drummer for the Beatles,
Yeah.
who was fired right before they made it big.
Yeah.
Best could have easily spiraled
Right.
into bitterness and resentment,
Right.
but instead he chose to focus on building a happy life for himself,
And ultimately he did.
which is inspiring.
Right.
Right. Like we have a choice
Yeah.
in how we respond to setbacks, challenges.
That's right.
And it's a powerful example of how our choices shape our reality.
Exactly. We have the power to choose our mindset,
Yeah.
our perspective,
Right.
and ultimately our destiny.
It's a great reminder that we do have control
Yeah.
over how we respond to things.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to another concept that Manson highlights, the power of saying no.
Oh, yes. The art of setting boundaries.
He's a huge advocate for that.
He is. He argues that learning to say no is essential for protecting our time,
Right.
our energy,
Yeah.
our emotional well-being.
And he tells this funny story about his time in Russia,
Oh, yeah.
where he was initially shocked by how blunt and direct people were.
Uh-huh.
Like, he found it rude at first,
Right.
but then he realized it was actually just honesty
Yeah, it's a refreshing change.
from the fake politeness we're
Yeah.
used to in Western culture.
Yeah.
And he talks about how that experience helped him
Mm-hmm.
to embrace saying no
Yeah.
in his own life.
It's okay to disappoint people.
Right.
It is.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's important to set boundaries
Absolutely.
for our own well-being.
Yeah,
And I think that's such a valuable message,
it is.
especially in today's world
Uh-huh.
where we're constantly bombarded
Yeah.
with requests and demands on our time.
Yeah, learning to say no is a form of self-care.
I like that.
Yeah.
So it's not selfish.
Not at all.
It's about prioritizing your needs,
Exactly.
your values.
And it ties into this idea of commitment,
Okay.
which Manson argues is actually where true freedom comes from.
That's interesting. So freedom comes from commitment.
He says it's about choosing a direction
Okay.
and sticking to it,
Yeah.
even when things get tough,
Okay.
when doubts creep in.
But how does that tie into freedom?
Well, he suggests that our fear of commitment often stems from a fear of death.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Right. He argues that when we fully commit to something,
Yeah.
we're acknowledging that our time is finite.
Okay.
We're saying we're willing to invest our limited resources in this one thing.
So it's about accepting the limitations of life.
Exactly.
Making peace with the fact that we can't have it all.
You can't do everything. You can't be everything to everyone.
Right. We have to make choices.
Yeah.
And those choices come with trade-offs.
Exactly.
He uses this analogy of romantic love to illustrate this point. He says the way love is often portrayed as this like all-consuming passionate whirlwind is actually pretty messed up.
He even critiques Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
He says it's not a celebration of love, but rather a cautionary tale about the dangers of immature and impulsive love.
So not the ultimate love story that we've been told it is.
Right. And Romeo and Juliet lack that maturity.
Right.
Self-awareness, ability to set healthy boundaries, which are essential for a truly healthy and sustainable relationship.
He's advocating for a more realistic approach to love.
Absolutely.
One that's based on mutual respect, clear boundaries, willingness to reject and be rejected.
That's right.
It's about choosing a partner who complements us,
Yes.
who shares our values, and who allows us to be our authentic selves.
That's right.
Even with all our flaws.
Exactly.
Which brings us back to this concept of boundaries.
Yeah.
Which is such a key theme.
It is.
Throughout the book. He's such a big believer in boundaries.
He is. He defines them as the lines between two people's responsibilities for their own problems and emotions.
And he gives some really good examples of healthy versus unhealthy boundaries in relationships. Like the difference between taking responsibility for our own emotions versus expecting our partner to manage them for us.
Right.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
And he also talks about, you know, not taking on too much responsibility for our partner's problems.
Yeah, which can lead to codependency.
Resentment, all that stuff.
Exactly.
It's about finding that balance between being supportive, but also allowing our partner the space to deal with their own challenges. He even goes so far as to say that a lack of boundaries can contribute to infidelity.
Really?
He argues that cheating is often a symptom of deeper issues within the relationship. Lack of communication, unmet needs, misalignment of values.
That makes sense.
And he makes this point that if someone is willing to cheat, it means something else is more important to them than the relationship.
And that's a red flag.
Right.
It's a sign that the foundation of trust has eroded.
So how do we start to build these healthy boundaries? I mean, it's one thing to talk about it, but how do we actually put it into practice?
Well, he emphasizes the importance of honesty. Open communication. He even shares this really bold example from his own marriage. He tells his wife when he thinks she looks bad.
Oh, wow. That's brave.
Yeah. It might hurt her feelings, but he believes in being honest.
And it creates that space for both partners to express themselves.
Right, to feel safe.
Even if it's not always positive. It's about seeing each other fully, accepting each other unconditionally.
Absolutely.
So it's building trust. Through honesty, vulnerability, having those hard conversations.
And he stresses that conflict is a natural part of any healthy relationship.
It's inevitable.
Right.
It is. It's not about avoiding disagreements. It's about learning to navigate them.
So it's how we handle it.
Exactly.
That's what matters.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of his point about choosing our struggles wisely, even in relationships. We have to choose what's worth fighting for.
Yeah. What issues are really important?
What battles are we willing to let go of?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No relationship is perfect.
Yeah.
There will always be challenges. Disagreements.
It's about seeing those as opportunities.
Exactly.
To learn more about
enormously about ourselves.
Right. Rather than as threats.
That's right.
To the relationship.
Yeah. And this all points to the importance of self-awareness.
Oh, huge.
In relationships. We have to understand our own needs, values, emotional patterns before we can expect to have a good relationship.
Manson emphasizes that self-awareness is fundamental to building healthy relationships.
Right.
We have to know ourselves, our triggers, our needs, our insecurities before we can truly connect with another person.
And that can be challenging.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
self-discovery can be painful.
It can be.
Yeah.
But ultimately incredibly rewarding.
Because it allows us to show up
Yeah.
as our most authentic selves.
Absolutely.
Which is essential
Yeah.
for real connection.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing process too, right?
It is.
Like as we grow and evolve our needs, our values might change.
It's important to be open to those shifts.
Right.
Communicate them to our partners.
And this whole conversation about boundaries, commitment, it underscores Manson's central message.
Which is?
That happiness and fulfillment come from choosing our values wisely, taking responsibility, and embracing the struggles of life.
It's about letting go of that need to control everything.
Right.
Accepting uncertainty.
Yeah.
Finding meaning in the journey.
The journey is the destination.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have to savor each step along the way.
Absolutely.
Have to learn to say no to the things that don't matter.
Right.
So that we can say yes to the things that do.
That's right.
It's about making conscious choices.
Yeah.
About how we spend our time, our energy.
Absolutely.
Aligning our actions with our values.
It's about choosing our struggles wisely.
Right.
Embracing failure.
Yeah.
And building relationships.
Yeah.
Based on honesty, respect, and boundaries.
It's about confronting our fear of death, not by denying it, but by using it as a catalyst.
That's right.
To live a more authentic life.
A meaningful life.
Recognizing that our time here is limited.
And that every moment is a gift.
It's about not giving a feck about the things that don't matter. So we can give a wholehearted feck about the things that do.
Yeah.
It's about being intentional with our lives.
Absolutely.
About figuring out, what really lights us up.
Yeah.
What makes us come alive and pursuing that.
It's a powerful framework for living a more intentional life.
Yeah.
Even amidst all the chaos.
Right. And Manson really challenges us to rethink some of our deeply ingrained beliefs about happiness, success, even the nature of reality.
Right. And he does it in a way that's really engaging.
Yeah, I mean, he's not your typical self-help guru.
Right, not at all. He's honest, he's vulnerable.
Yeah.
He's a little irreverent at times.
Yeah, but I think what makes his work resonate is that he doesn't just tell us what to think.
Right.
He helps us think for ourselves.
He empowers us to question our own assumptions.
Exactly.
Figure out what truly matters to us.
And he even uses this great metaphor about how self-awareness is like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Yes. The more layers you peel back, the more you might cry.
Right. But it's through that process of confronting our flaws that we truly grow.
It's a powerful metaphor.
It is.
It speaks to that discomfort that can come with true self-discovery.
It's not a destination.
Right.
It's a journey.
It's a process.
It's continuous.
Yeah.
We're always evolving.
Absolutely.
Always learning more about ourselves.
That's right.
And he also says, it's okay to be wrong.
Oh, yeah.
To make mistakes.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, part of it.
We're going to screw up.
Right.
We're going to have those moments.
Yeah.
Where we realize our beliefs are off base.
Yeah, but he says those moments are the catalyst for the most significant growth.
It's like our worldview gets shattered.
Yeah.
And then we have the opportunity to rebuild something stronger.
More aligned with who we are.
That's right.
And he has this great quote. He says, we shouldn't seek to find the ultimate right answer. Rather, we should seek to chip away at the ways that we're wrong today.
So we can be a little less wrong tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah. That's so good.
And a big part of that involves recognizing our own biases.
Oh, yeah.
Our limitations.
Our blind spots.
Yeah. You know, our brains are these incredible meaning-making machines.
Absolutely.
They try to create order out of chaos.
Yeah, they're looking for those patterns.
Right. And that can be helpful.
It can.
But it can also be misleading.
Totally.
We can draw false conclusions.
Yeah.
Based on incomplete information.
We can get so attached to our interpretations.
Right.
That we fail to see other perspectives.
He tells this story about Meredith Marin.
Oh, yeah.
This journalist who came to believe that her father had sexually abused her.
Wow.
But then later realized that that memory was completely fabricated.
It's a powerful example of how our brains can create these false memories.
It's scary.
But it highlights the importance of being critical of our own thoughts, our emotions, especially when it comes to trauma.
It's about approaching our experiences with a sense of curiosity.
Yeah.
Humility. recognizing that we don't always have the full picture.
Right.
Being willing to revise our narratives.
And this also ties into the idea of projecting our own values onto others.
Oh, yeah. Which can lead to all sorts of problems.
Yeah, misunderstandings, conflicts.
Exactly.
He gives that example of his friend's brother.
Oh, yeah.
Who was so critical of his sister's engagement, even though he claimed to have no problem with her fiancé.
Right. It was clear that his judgment was clouded by his own beliefs and experiences.